And welcome to Outside the Classroom. I'm meteorologist Ryan Miller, science teacher as well. We're here to help you at home get through these times away from the classroom and away from school so that we can keep that learning process going and do it with some fun activities that you can simply create with things around the house, requiring no runs to the grocery store or the craft store or anything. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be going over lots of things today related to relationships. In fact, that's going to be the theme of this week here. We went from patterns last week over to relationships, and we're going to be looking at lots of things and all things relationship here between now and Friday. And with the idea of relationships coming up here, we're going to be looking at relationships as they relate to life. So the relationships we have with each other, with science. We're going to be looking at relationships in mathematics and in literature. And we're going to be looking at it in the environment. So lots of different ways to look at and examine, easy for me to spell this here, environment. We're going to be looking at these types of relationships this week, whether it's the relationships, again, that we observe on a daily basis, but don't necessarily understand or get or even recognize. We're going to be looking at some chemical reactions that'll be a fun activity. It'll also make a mess, so we'll probably be doing them outside. And we're going to be looking at all kinds of things here. Now, I did want to mention a few things. We've had some great interactions with folks online, and we invite you to send us some photos, videos, ideas, lessons, anything. We're here as a resource to share throughout the entire community all of the things we can do to keep the learning process going. You might be asking yourself, wait a minute, he's in pajamas today. Why is he wearing pajamas? Well, the reason for that, and the reason we're going to be wearing different things all day or every day this week, is that we're going to have a Spirit Week. The high school I teach at, Washington Liberty in Arlington, the students there decided, because they're away from school and away from the classroom, that they would like to try and do some type of Spirit Week at home so everybody can share their videos and their pictures, and just a way to connect virtually, if you will, here with all the folks in our school community. And it's not just our school. We're inviting everybody that's watching the show, anybody that's out there, please take pictures of yourself wearing pajamas. That's today's theme. Tomorrow's theme, it looks like it's going to be Jersey Day. You can wear your favorite team's jersey, or you can wear a shirt representing that jersey or that team. Wednesday, tie-dye day. We can talk about relationships between the colors and patterns and things that we see in tie-dye. Thursday, well, it's dress-up day. I'm going to get my tuxedo out. Hopefully it still fits. We'll figure that one out here on Thursday when we get there. But dress up. We're going to get our shirts, ties, anything that would be considered formal and get out of the pajamas. And then Friday, school pride. I'm going to be wearing my blue and gray. Those are the colors of our school at Washington Liberty. But please wear your colors of your school no matter where you are. So these are some of the themes for the week with respect to our Spirit Week, and share and show your videos and photos with us. We have some pictures here that were sent to us. We have a picture from Riley that was from Arlington. Riley from last week did some gardening and showed us the patterns that she planted in her flowers. Riley, thank you so much for connecting with us and showing us your patterns in gardening. That's a great thing to show. And we've also had some videos that have been sent in. We're going to be looking at a video from the folks at Pepco, and in particular, Christina Frank, who is a wildlife biologist who was going to look at and show us some of the things in the patterns and relationships that we see in birds. And we're going to go to that video right now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina. I'm a wildlife biologist reporting to you from my urban backyard in Wilmington, Delaware. I just wanted to take a few minutes to make sure everyone is safe at home and everybody's trying to stay positive. This morning I wanted to share with you a few activities that you could do outside. We are still allowed to go outside, making sure you maintain your 6-foot distance from people. But there's plenty of things that we can do outside, whether it's, just in your backyard or down the street or at a local park, that'll help lift up our spirits and get us through this together. So one thing I like to do when I'm outside is look for birds. And so I will talk about a couple common bird species that you can find just outside your window, maybe in your urban backyard or down the street. So first, a little bit about myself. Again, I'm a wildlife biologist, and I've got my son, a young wildlife biologist in training. This is Fisher. He's here to help me this morning. I work for Pepco Holdings, which is a power delivery company. Basically, our job is to make sure that every day you turn the light switch on and the lights come on. So we get electricity to each and every one of your houses every day and every night. My job specifically is to protect birds and other animals that might land on some of the energized equipment that you might see outside in front of your house. And if you look carefully to our left as I'm speaking, we have a couple house sparrows that are showing interest in a small nest that I will show you in just a few minutes. So again, I'm a wildlife biologist working for the electricity company. So to start off, I just wanted to share a couple resources with you that you can use to help identify birds, again, in your backyard, down the street, or at a local park. And these guys are getting pretty noisy over there. They're busy building a nest. So first, I want to, of course, remind you that you could use a bird ID book, but if you don't have one of these handy, we do have a lot of applications that are available on your phone or anywhere on the internet. A really, really good resource is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's allaboutbirds.org. They have a great app that you can have on your phone. It's called Merlin. And I was just using it this morning. It just actually takes you through 5 different questions to get you to a number of different species that you could be looking at. It's very, very easy to use, and it can be very useful. So starting off today, we're going to talk about a couple species, again, that you could see right out your window or in your urban backyard. The first of these is the American robin. Typically, I don't have any grass in my backyard, but typically these birds, which are native to this country and certainly this area, can usually be found in a grassy area, kind of strutting along as they pull out earthworms from the ground. I have their song here, which I will play for you. Give me 1 second. Well, my signal's not working too great, so American robins have especially the male, have a bright orange chest, and they're fairly dark on the back. Their song is very sing-songy, and again, you can hear them pretty much everywhere. I saw a couple this morning perched behind me. And on the computer, if you can hear it, there's a low guttural sound that they sometimes make as well. So the other species we can talk about is the one that seems to be entertaining us here over to my left, and that is the house sparrow. This is a very, very common species as well. It's actually not a native bird to this country. It was introduced many, many years ago, but it's done very, very well in many areas of the country. And so I noticed the other day that they actually are working on a nest. The nest was used last year, and we'll just walk up to it very quietly. There's a lot of cover in that bush, so they don't tend to be too disturbed by us. But we'll sneak up and try to see that nest. And again, they're here getting ready to nest for the season. They may fly off as I push this aside. It's right there in the middle. Small nest composed of small twigs, sticks, leaves. And I can see the bird in the background of the bush. These little sparrows, they often have, the males, they have dark cheeks, the black coming down into their chin, and overall their back is somewhat brown with a lighter colored chest. And again, these are very, very, very common.
And that's Christina, wildlife biologist Christina. She works for Pepco, and one of her jobs is to monitor wildlife, including birds, as they relate back to the energy company. So thank you, Christina, so much for sharing that. For the rest of her video and to check out all of our resources, Outside the Classroom is online, WJLA.com. Just search for Outside the Classroom and you'll be directed to all of our resources. We are looking at relationships this week, and we're looking at the idea of relationships in life, in an environment, and in people, and we have a lot more when we return. Welcome back to Outside the Classroom. We are taking a look at relationships in life and in education. We're here as a resource to you, and we invite all of you to connect with us, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Twitter. And please, at WJLA.com, share us and show us your resources. We are going over the idea of the learning process, the idea of activating prior knowledge and asking questions first before we start to get into a lesson, making the learning active, getting outside, making it physically active to keep the engagement going, and to think about the idea of multiple intelligences. Does your child or the kid that you're caregiving and providing caregiving for, does that child have a tendency to do better at one topic or another? Do they like to be outside? Those are some things to consider. We have a video from Donna, one of my colleagues in the Arlington Public Schools, who's kind enough to take a look at the idea of relationships in the idea of words and in letters.
Hi everybody. I was so excited to hear that Outside the Classroom was doing a segment on relationships. And when I think about relationships, I always think about the relationships between the things outside in our everyday world and the words that we use when we talk and the words that we see when we read and when we write. So I thought that we could play a little game with relationships. So I'm going to say a word. I'm going to name an object that I see here out in my backyard, and I'm going to ask you what sound you hear at the beginning. Let's give it a try. The first thing we're going to talk about is the shed. So if you listen to the word shed, what sound do you hear at the beginning? Yeah, you hear the sh sound at the beginning of shed. Another thing that I see outside in my yard is my dog, Murphy. So if you think about that word dog, what sound do you hear at the beginning of the word dog? Yeah, you hear the d sound. All right, now I'm gonna challenge you to think a little bit harder. Let's come over here and see what else we see. So in the back of my yard, I have 2 chairs. So when you listen to that word chair, what sound do you hear at the beginning of chair? Yeah, you hear the ch sound. Can you think of another word that starts like chair? Yeah, cheese, church, and China all start with the ch sound. One more thing I want to show you. So over here growing in my backyard is bamboo. Say that word with me, bamboo. What word or what sound do you hear at the beginning of bamboo? Did you say you hear the b sound? If you did, you're right. You hear the b sound at the beginning of bamboo. What other words do you know that start like bamboo? I bet you could list a whole bunch of words that start like bamboo. So parents, families, if you're thinking about other ways that you can think about relationships between the objects that you see in your everyday world and the letters and sounds that your children are learning in school, you can ask them questions like, what sounds do you hear at the beginning? Or what sounds do you hear at the end? If you want to give them a real challenge, you can talk about the middle sounds in the words. Hopefully I'll be back with you again to talk about more relationships between letters and sounds.
So very much. And we're going to be going over some of those relationships between patterns that we see in letters and in words. I'd like to invite my daughter, Kennedy. Kennedy, come on over here for a few moments. We're going to try to talk about some of the patterns that we see in the words. Could you write your name down right here in big letters, starting right here this way? Now, Kennedy is a unique name because Kennedy starts with that K sound, and you have to think about the idea of K as it relates to either C or K. Now, Kennedy, if you look at the very end of it, now if you can come over here, Kennedy, for a moment, you would think with the Kennedy that the E would actually be the letter E, but it's not. It's a Y. So it's a complicated relationship between the English language and our use of letters to represent sounds, whether it's E represented by an E or whether it's E represented by a Y. So there's lots of activities that you can do with letters, and I know that Donna mentioned bamboo, and this is also outside the backyard. So we've got that B there. One of the other things is the idea of relationships as they relate to the way we get along with others. And we're going to demonstrate a real easy activity related to relationships and the idea of trust. Kennedy's going to fall back, and knowing that I was going to catch her, luckily, knowing that I was going to catch her, we were able to establish that idea of a relationship between people, trust being one of those factors. We're going to be looking at lots of other things here coming up in just a little bit. Kennedy's got her pajamas on. I do too. We invite you to take a picture with your pajamas on and send it to us. Outside the classroom, we are back, and I'm meteorologist and science teacher Ryan Miller. Thank you so much for joining us on this nice, sunny and mild day here in our backyard. We are going to be looking at the relationship and the themes related to relationships here for the next few days. We're in our pajamas. It's Spirit Week on Outside the Classroom, and we're going to be looking at a video right now that looks at and explores the idea of how to manage and deal with the relationships that we have at home during these trying times. One of the things you're going to be hearing is the idea of self-talk. Being able to tell yourself, I can do things. When my kids get up in the morning and they come down the stairs, we try to enforce this idea of thinking positive, high self-efficacy, say only positive things. My colleague Heather Davis in the Arlington Public Schools sent us this video.
Hey everybody, my name's Heather Davis. I'm a school counselor at McKinley Elementary School in Arlington, Virginia. And as we're adjusting to this new routine and new schedules, being at home and trying to help our kids learn from home, I wanted to share a few tips to help them stay on task and hopefully stay more motivated to do some learning at home. So the first tip is to create the time and the space for learning. So build a routine so they know when learning is supposed to be happening, and so they have a space. So whether that's in their room, in a certain spot in the house or the apartment, and even maybe a basket or things where they can put all the learning into when they're done, so they can kind of put it away as well, so they don't feel like I'm always at school wherever I am in the house. The second tip is be flexible. Kids are in school 7.5 hours a day. They're not sitting and learning, focusing for 7.5 hours a day. Usually it's maybe 20 or 30-minute chunks, and a lot of times they're not working independently. They're in a group or with a partner. So you know your kids the best. Some of them are going to love this independent time to work by themselves, and some are really going to struggle with it. So make sure that you're setting kind of realistic expectations for your own child and how they're going to learn best. And then the third tip, encourage your kids to use self-talk. So elementary counselors across Arlington teach kids to use self-talk to stay on task and to really motivate themselves when things are challenging. So especially with hard tasks, so telling themselves, I can do it, just 2 more minutes, 1 more problem, and model this for your kids when you're working through your own challenges with work at home. So keep up the good work. We're all learning this together, and look out for all the resources that are out there to also help you kind of navigate this.
This is Outside the Classroom. I'm meteorologist Ryan Miller, science teacher as well. We're here taking a look and exploring the idea and the theme of relationships. We have been looking at the relationships between letters and words and the sounds that they make, the relationships between people, the relationships in science and in math. We've got some candies we're going to be playing with here, and if you bear with us, we're going to go ahead and start to try and walk outside so that we can actually show you some of these relationships as we observe them through the idea of the interaction and the chemistry happening here. So I'm going to keep talking and we're going to start walking, and we're going to head out to where we can actually start and show you some of these reactions. And listen, there are lots of things around the house that you can use and show and as examples to the different types of relationships that exist here. Now, this is a pretty famous relationship. Doesn't take much of an introduction or anything to mention here, but we're going to be exploring the idea of the interactions that occur from a chemical standpoint from using soda and looking at some candies. Now, I have two types of candies. We've got one here that's a pretty familiar candy. I'll put this in, and we get a little bit of a reaction. Something of a volcanic reaction here. But if we take another type of candy, different from the one that I just did, and we put it in, well, you get a much larger reaction, and that's certainly a relationship. Thanks for joining us. This is Outside the Classroom. Hi there, I'm meteorologist Ryan Miller, science teacher as well, and this is Outside the Classroom. Thank you so much for joining us on this very nice day, spring day in fact, with lots of changes. The theme this week and for the show is relationships, and looking at the idea of how relationships play an important and integral role, not only with how we get along with each other, but how relationships show up in math, science, literature, reading. And this is a quick example that you could do at home possibly if you have the access to a backyard and you would want to look at and explore some relationships in ecology. My assistant here, my able assistant Kennedy, is going to be coming in with a lot of soil actually, be careful, that she just grabbed from the garden. Thank you, Kennedy. And your hands are dirty. I'm sorry. If you want to go inside and wash them, you're welcome to do that. Thank you. So with my assistant bringing me some soil, one of the experiments that I do as an environmental science teacher is looking at the idea of the relationship between variables and some of the things that happen in science. So we have some compostable cardboard. And if you've ever been out and possibly gone to a restaurant or some location where you are served something that says compostable, as this one was given to me, or this one was provided where I went to get a cup of coffee, well, here's an idea for you that you could do at home and potentially as an experiment looking at the idea of the relationships between temperature, soil, and decomposition. Inside this soil, this is soil from my garden, we have lots of different bacteria that are actually good for you. And speaking of relationships, there has been a science study that indicates that if you go outside and play with soil with your hands, that it's a potential way to feel better about yourself because the exposure to the bacteria in the soil actually provides and stimulates chemicals in our brain to make us feel happier and better. So that's an example of a relationship. But one of the relationships that you could do at home as an experiment, you could get some glass jars. And with your glass jars, you could take some of the compostable paper and you could put it in, tear it up into pieces, and then you could put some of the soil on top of the pieces. Kennedy did a really good job of packing this with soil here. And I'm getting exposure to soil, so hopefully I'll feel a little bit happier here after I have to clean this mess up. But we've got a bunch of the soil that's from the garden loaded into the jar with this compostable paper. You could do several different experiments with this if you wanted to seal it up or put some water in there and then leave this one not sealed. That would be a way to look at the relationship between sealing up and starving this of oxygen. So if you have more oxygen or less oxygen, would you see the paper decompose? Or you could look at things like water. You could put water in one and water not in the other one. Or you can look at it from the relationship of temperature and decomposition. Again, the bacteria in here will start to decompose this. If you wanted to put one of these in your house, make it warmer, maybe one outside, and then compare, you'll start to notice differences that show up with decomposition as the bacteria in the soil work to decompose our compostable paper. So that's an idea for you. If you wanted to take a step further, you could take some of the compostable paper, or you could look at it over a couple of weeks, go back, open it up, take a peek at the different types of conditions you've created, and see if you can measure or possibly detect the size changes and graph that out and see if there's a relationship that exists with that. So this is one of the examples and an idea for you looking at decomposition and the relationship between variables of temperature or water or oxygen and the relationships between those and decomposition. There's going to be a lot more information on activities like this and others on our website. And please, if you do some of these activities at home, you could share those activities. Or if you have a question, send it my way. I'm on Twitter, Ryan Miller _WX for weather. And we will be glad to showcase and share some of your crafty and handiwork here on Outside the Classroom. So we can go to WJLA.com. You're going to find all kinds of resources out there as well. All of these resources related to and relative to the idea of relationships and the relationships all around us. We've been looking outside this morning. It's a beautiful morning. In the garden, if you're looking at an idea to look at relationships as they relate to nature, perhaps you can look at the interactions that occur between organisms, animals. If you have a backyard filled with lots of different creatures, or if you just stay still. My wonderful photographer, Rich, he and I were looking outside a few minutes ago. There was a beautiful cardinal out there. But what's the relationship between the cardinal and the environment? Why does that cardinal have an interest in coming here? So if you're at home today, one of the things you could consider looking at from a relationship standpoint is what relationships, do you see any relationships that you can observe in the organisms that live in and around your apartment building or your house? You can take a peek and notice if you see any birds that are building nests. You could look for any idea of if you have a bird feeder, perhaps some squirrels interacting with other organisms. So the interactions that happen between organisms are certainly something that you can note and keep a log, keep a diary in your house of the relationships showing up. We'll have a lot more on relationships in just a moment. Welcome back to Outside the Classroom. I'm Ryan Miller. We have been looking at relationships as they apply to life and to people and to nature and mathematics as well. One of the things, I know you've probably heard about recycling at home, where you can take the materials that we are no longer using, the waste we generate, and how that can be returned and reused as another object. But have you ever heard of something called upcycling? Sarah sent us this video of an activity she does at home related to the idea of upcycling and how the relationships between the waste we generate and upcycling can be one of the ways we can minimize the amount of garbage that we produce.
Welcome to Outside the Classroom. I am Sarah Tarasinski, and this is my son, Sebastian. And today we are going to show you guys some really fun DIYs. That's right. They also happen to be Sebastian's favorite, right? Yep. He picked these three, or chose these three. Now, Sebastian, when we do DIYs at home, which we are right now at home, what is the one thing that we have in common with everything that we do? Upcycling, that's right, super important. And what is upcycling?
Before you throw it away, you reuse it.
That's right.
Make it something new.
And make it something new, that's right. So, we're gonna start with your very favorite, this is his favorite, DIY. And what are we gonna make here?
A rocket.
A rocket. So we've got, an empty candy container. So you can use an empty candy container that's plastic with
like
a little...
M&Ms.
Yeah, like M&Ms, something like that, or little medicine container, or you can use a film canister, anything that has a lid that pops off easily. And then you need some Alka-Seltzer, right? Some Alka-Seltzer tablets. Then we're gonna take our little container.
And you also need water.
Right, we need water. What do we need to do first though?
Put the Alka-Seltzer in.
Yeah, put the Alka-Seltzer in. We'll put 1 to 2 Alka-Seltzer in. And what do we need to do after we put the Alka-Seltzer in before we put the water in?
Oh, we need to put on our safety glasses.
Safety glasses, that's right. Safety glasses, yep. Then you're gonna take just a little bit of water, just a few, few drops, and squeeze it in. Quick, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And then we're gonna put the lid on and we're gonna flip it upside down and then it's gonna pop. Whoa, let's try it again. Wait, ready? What is building up inside of there that's gonna make it pop? Pressure, whoa!
That was fun.
That was fun. That's a good one. So Sebastian and his little brother do that one all the time, and they do it against each other to see who can get theirs the highest. So that's a really fun one. Okay, little science and a little fun of cycling. Our next one is one that you can do outside or inside, right? Okay, this is another big favorite.
It depends the weather.
Depends on the weather. And you know, you can play with these in the bathtub, right? Yeah, or outside, and it's a great way to not use balloons, right?
Like water balloons.
Water balloons.
Because they're very wasteful.
Yes, they are wasteful.
When you throw them, they pop. No more.
And that's it, no more. So we are gonna make water blasters, right? So you take sponges, if you have some around your house, you know, if they're, you know, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want my kids to use those, they've been used, just bleach them in the washing machine. Then you can take the sponges and you take your sponge, you take a pair of scissors, you cut it into strips, right, Sebastian?
Yep.
So you cut a bunch of strips and then you stack your strips together in a little pile and you take one piece of string, get yourself a little pile going, and then you lift up your pile. Yeah, that's perfect. Let's do it. We can make a really big one. And then you put your string underneath, right? And then what do? You come around and you tie it. Tie it tight, and then you tie it in a double knot. And then you get all of these great super soakers. Reusable, the kids can use them over and over again. They can go outside in the yard and use them, or they can use them in the bathtub. These are really fun. And last but not least, what do we got, Sebastian? Water bottles, right?
Water bottles. Huge, humongous
water bottles. This is a big favorite of my kids as well. You can do it in a hallway in your house, or you can do it in the driveway. If you have glow sticks at home, you could use that. Little food coloring, put some water in your plastic bottles that you're using up at home, about halfway full, and then you fill it up with what? You've got a little food coloring here. Sebastian picked red, so go ahead and put your red food coloring in. And then if you have some glow sticks, that's great. You can do it at night. If you don't, no need. You don't need to do glow sticks. And then you put your lid on, and then you shake it up. And then you guys have your kids grab any ball in the house, right? Any ball you got, soccer ball, whatever you got, take them all outside, line them up, and you can bowl with them. And it's really fun at night, especially if you have glow sticks, because they kind of light up. But if you don't have glow sticks, because, you know, obviously that's not something you can run out and get right now, you can always stick LED lights behind them, so it kind of makes them glow as you bowl, right?
And then after you shaked up your thing, you open it.
Yeah, that's right. You can open it up and stick in a
glow stick.
Glow stick.
But if you don't have a glow stick,
it's okay. You can use the LED lights, or you can not use it at all. So, Sebastian, thanks for being my partner today and helping me with this. Yeah, this was really fun. We hope you guys have a great day, and we hope you have enjoyed our upcycled DIYs.
And this is Spirit Week on Outside the Classroom. I'm in my pajamas. Today is Pajama Day. Tomorrow's theme for Spirit Week is going to be wear your jerseys or represent your favorite teams. So please put your pajamas on. If you already got dressed again, take a photo and send it to us, and we'd love to share it at WJLA.com/chime in, or on the Outside the Classroom website. You can share them with us as well, or please on Twitter. We are here for you. We have been looking at relationships today, things you can do at home, relationships and mapping. We're going to get outside right now and look at the idea of relationships as forces in nature and in physics interact with things like cars. We got some ideas that you could do at home to take a look at relationships in math. All of that when we return. This is Outside the Classroom. I'm Ryan Miller. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here to try and serve you and to give you some ideas of things we can do outside of the classroom, away from school, enriching learning activities that are simple, easy to do, but keep that educational process going. The idea and the theme of relationships, that's what we have been exploring and looking at here over the last few minutes, and we're going to continue with that theme of relationships all week. If you have any videos or ideas or activities that you could share with us related to relationships, we would welcome them. WJLA.com/chime-in, CHIMEIN. Well, relationships as they relate back to, I should say, physics are certainly showing up. We've got relationships that are occurring with gravity and the forces that are all around us. And we've got lots of different ways to express and look at the relationships as they show up in gravity and in physics. One of the things you could do at home, a potential experiment here, is if you have a simple board, you could even use a piece of cardboard, is to try and figure out and turn this into a measurement activity. If you wanted to take a car or anything around the house that you could even use a ball to roll. And Rich, if you don't mind rolling that ball to me, I dropped a ball right before we came back from break and it rolled under the street and it almost went down into the sewer. So luckily it didn't. But here we go. We've got a couple of things to examine and look at. You could take a car, put it on a board, let it run down. And obviously there are modifications that can be made to this activity, but you could measure the distance that shows when these cars, and this is a simple tape measure from somewhere in my house that I grabbed, and you can measure how far the cars travel as they go down a ramp. Take note, and this is where you can bring math into the idea of this activity, and then you can start to chart and graph out some of the patterns that you see. If you wanted to take a protractor, one of the devices that are used to measure angles, and hey, if you don't have a protractor at home, if you go to the Outside the Classroom section of WJLA.com, we have a downloadable template that you can print out, I should say, and use this downloadable template to measure the angles. One of the things with this activity is what happens, and it's obvious, you know, if you're playing with this and you begin to raise the angle of your board, but you can start to think about making predictions. Will the car go faster? How much faster will it go? You could measure speed. You could measure the distance traveled. And if you find ways to change the height of the object you're using to run the cars, try to experiment and see if you have some relationships. Measure the distance. If you have your protractor, you can measure the angle that shows up, and let me put it here. You can measure the angle that's right here between the board right here, and the ground. If you measure that angle out, then you can start to create and do a chart. I have some sidewalk chalk here. So when you're looking to make a chart, if you wanted to use sidewalk chalk, that's certainly something you could do. But you could then use for your x-axis, remember this is the x-axis, you could use angles, so maybe 45 degrees as an angle, and then you can use the distance that the car travels on your y-axis, so maybe 10, 20, 30 inches, and then start to map it out. See if you can take, well, if at 45 degrees it goes 20, you can connect the dots, make a point, and see if you have a relationship that shows up mathematically and graphically, and that relationship between the angle that you create with that board and the distance that the car travels. Simple things to do at home, simple things that are easy to do. If you don't have a protractor, WJLA.com, we got you covered. I'm Ryan Miller. This is Outside the Classroom. We're here to provide you some easy-to-do activities to keep that learning process going. I wanted to go back to one of the things we were talking about just a few minutes ago. And if you have young children at home, or if you are far removed from the geometry lessons of the past, let's review how to measure an angle. We have the ability here to change the angle and how much of an elevation that we change in a board, and then start to measure how cars go down the board. and then we could graph that out. But if you need to remember or get a little recap here on how to measure an angle, let's just say that this is our board right here. And I know we're working with shadows here, but I'll try to accommodate here. This is our board, this is the ground. And as we put our car, and I'll put the car here, and we let the car go down the board, the angle that you would want to measure is the angle that shows up right here. So you want to measure, using degrees, how many degrees is right here between the ground and the board. And you can use your protractor to do that if you set it up. And then, easy for me to do here, you set up your protractor, and then you can start measuring the angles that show up here with your boards. This angle right here looks to be a little bit close to about 30 degrees, 35 degrees. So that's a way to measure angles. If you don't have a protractor, we've got some online, some templates, and certainly feel free to do that. We've got the idea of relationships happening here. One of my neighbors is walking down the street, relationships that we have with animals showing up. If you've got a pet at home, well, there's a great example of mutualism and a great example of relationships in our relationships with animals of different species. One of the other things that we could talk about for a moment, if you wanted to get outside, many of us have thermometers that allow you to measure the temperature of your head if you're not feeling so well. Well, you could put that thermometer to use. If everybody's feeling well in your house, no fevers, head outside with that thermometer and see if you can measure some of the things that are happening outside relative to relationships. For example, do we see a relationship that exists between the temperature of a lawn or a grassy area around your apartment building? You can measure that temperature. Right now, the temperature of the grass right here where I'm measuring is 61 degrees Fahrenheit. You could take a look at, and from a mathematics standpoint, convert the Fahrenheit temperatures to Celsius. That's a little bit more involved, but we can provide you that resource if you need to look online. And then you can measure the temperature of the concrete. And the temperature of the concrete, as I measure it, is actually 59 degrees. So why would you see a warmer temperature here versus the concrete? That will be a thing to look at in terms of relationship. Objects that are a little bit brighter and whiter have a better tendency to reflect light. So maybe the sunshine that's reflecting off this concrete is going back out and reflected back out into the atmosphere, allowing it to be slightly cooler at the time. Well, the grass and the soil here is darker. Darker objects absorb light. And if it's absorbing sunlight, then chances are, and perhaps that's why it's warmer. But use one of those thermometers. Go out and start measuring the temperature of different objects and see, do you detect a pattern? Does the temperature difference that exists in the sidewalk and the grass differ from the grass and the street? We just talked about the idea of absorption. So if the grass has a temperature right now of 65 degrees, and we're going to go over here to the road surface, please be careful. If you live on a busy street, don't do it on that busy street. But if you have a quiet street and you have some supervision, you can start measuring the temperature. So think about it. Predict in your mind. What do you think the temperature of the pavement would be? It's a darker surface. Well, as I start measuring it and taking the temperature is 69 degrees. So we have a warmer surface here. Why? Because it's darker. That's an idea for you. You can get outside, take a look, measure things, and get back to us. Let us know what we can do to make the learning process continue.